Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets fall on the road against the Charlotte Hornets, increasing the losing streak to 7. But D'Angelo Russell puts up a performance in the process. And did the Raptors do their part for the tanking agenda? We dive in. Coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marnbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And Doug, these ones stick with us. As you know, we're a big supporter of getting wins. Every single win that we can find on the schedule we want. But the Nets fall 105-102, and we hope that they can bounce back this week.
Yeah, for those keeping track at home, from the day that we started rooting for wins in an active way, 0-7. 0-7 since that happened. And as we remind everybody, the only way this works is if you actually believe it. Okay, so I have to just preface this by saying that at the top, it's like, and by the way, this has been hard to stick to on Twitter, I will say, in terms of a lot of confusion over there. But anyway, this one was one of those ones that really tested because the Nets just had this one in the bag. I mean, we'll go through the game, but this game was essentially won. D'Angelo Russell was absolutely lighting it up. Looked like he had some backbreaking shots in the fourth quarter. And then the Nets I don't think they were trying to do this, honestly, but they didn't score for the final 4 minutes and 3 seconds of the game. They had 102 points at the 4 minute and 3 second mark. And they finished the game with 102 points. Zaire Williams made a three to put them up 9, look like it's pretty much over, and they simply just don't score all the way down. So this one, I mean, look, if you're rooting for the tank and you're rooting for the better lottery odds, you love this because, you know, a lot of things go right and then it all goes wrong. But I mean, like, this is kind of the story of the next season. It's, you don't really know if they're zigging or you're zagging or which way things are going. And this game, I felt like, wasn't their coup de grace, but it was pretty interesting, all things considered.
Yeah, it is funny. Like, you look at certain games, you just play against the Golden State Warriors, and you say, "Wow, look what you forced this team to do." If you just took the concept of how they have played certain teams defensively, the intensity, we know the offense has been an issue at times, but you have Cam Thomas back, and you mentioned there, you're up 9 points. We know this team doesn't always succeed offensively game over game, but the idea that against the Hornets, also put that into context in the type of team that they are this season and where they're at and who wasn't available for them last night. All of those things pushed together, and you go, all right, the Nets are going to grab a win here and get off this slide. There's no way that they could possibly, I guess they're not going to get across the line here. And the funny part to me is, as we talked about Jordi Fernandez so much this season, I think that's the reason why as you mentioned, we're all zigging towards victory. How did they zag to defeat? Because this isn't a team that really has shown that under Jordi, that can't get across the line in certain moments. And I guess from a coaching standpoint, you say, well, he'll find a way to draw up something that gets them a bucket here. And again, as we know, when you look at the percentages, you look at this team overall, they don't make a lot of shots. So it's like, it's not surprising, but it is borderline shocking against the Charlotte Hornets that you don't get this 9-point victory across the line late. Especially, by the way, I mean, you mentioned D'Angelo, like some of the performances inside this game too. You're like, oh yeah, but D'Lo, he'll go ahead and do something here for everybody. Or, oh, Cam Thomas will wake up a little bit down the stretch of this game. Something will happen that gets you, and I'm not even talking about a massive win. I'm talking about something will happen that gets the Nets 2 more points and maybe wins.
Yeah, I mean, they were 3.5 point road favorites against the Hornets in this game, which tells you a lot about what the Hornets were bringing to the table, because they were sitting out LaMelo Ball, sitting out Mark Williams, and so they're not really just bringing their A game anywhere close to their A game to this one at all. So right away, you just know, like, okay, well, what's really going to happen here? And the Nets just did look like the dominant team for most of the game. Outside of the final 4 minutes, that's really when the whole thing shifted. The Nets looked like they had this one pretty easily in hand, thanks in part to D'Angelo Russell was so good. Now, he only plays 29 minutes. He's kind of capped still with minutes. I mean, whether you want to say that's like, they're tanking and they're limiting him, or they just, everyone's kind of limited minutes. Nets were without Cam Johnson in this game, but it really does look like they have it in hand. And then it just they just can't score a single point like late in the game. D'Lo doesn't check in until about 3 minutes, like the 2:45 mark left in the game. He's 10 of 18, finishes with 28 points, had hit before he had left for his final rotation. Like before he left for his final rotation, he was like the player of the game. He couldn't miss. Yeah, he hits a three, comes back and hits another three, and that's when they go up. Yeah, sorry, I kind of buried the lead here. They were up on his second three. They went up 14. It was 7 minutes left, right? That's the one where I'm like,
there's two chunks here. There's two stretches where this thing breaks down for Brooklyn.
Right, because the Hornets had been pushing in sort of like a comeback mode early on. They had cut it to 7 with like 9 minutes left in the fourth. You're like, okay, maybe they're going to push here. But then basically those two D'Lo threes at like around the 8 and 7 minute mark, I would call those like backbreakers. At the time, I for sure thought they were backbreakers because he hits the second one. I'm like, this is over. Like they're up 14. He can't miss. What's really going to happen here? And that's where, again, he checks out and then they can't really score again. So I don't know. Like in terms of like a basketball breakdown of this game, we could go a couple different ways, I suppose, but more it's like the confusion around the Nets season around sort of like what's happening. And look, in the end, we want there to out a lot. We joke a lot, but we do want the lottery odds to be the best they can be, right? Like, it's sometimes confusing to kind of like to toe these like sort of sarcastic lines. But at the same time, we also don't want them to be a dumpster fire either, where they just like are getting trounced every game, or they're throwing out these teams like the Hornets. These teams are embarrassing. These other teams throw out there, like where everyone just gets sat. We talked about the Jazz. The Hornets is like a version of this. It's like it's embarrassing for the NBA to work like this. I don't want to root for that. I don't want to root for you just sitting all your good players and putting out just some trash piles night over night to get 5% better odds. I do think that's a bad product for the NBA, even though I understand the math behind it. And this game kind of just, I don't know, does it thread the needle for you in terms of like what you want to happen?
Coming up here. Yeah, I think that's the interesting part when we look at some of the minutes getting played here. And when you talk about D'Angelo Russell and what he does just before he gets taken off the court and the timing of when he comes back on the court and the fact that he plays under 30 minutes in a game like this. You mentioned no Cam Johnson as well. Listen, it was far from 100% roster for Charlotte also, who improves to 15 and 48, by the way, with this home win. And then the bench players as well. Let's get into coming up here in a second, the needle thread of what the Brooklyn Nets did last night relative to how we've talked about other teams near the top end of the worst end of records in the NBA. We'll do that in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh you save thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. Super simple. Any player scores 50 or more in a game through the 24-25 regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order. 50 points, 50% off an order. That's easy to remember. Up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. You get that game day feast going, the late night cravings, lunch on the go. Not a lot of Nets that are at risk of just getting that 50 up here. I mean, Cam Thomas on a given night, I guess, could get there. D'Lo was trending that way if he plays all the minutes, but it's all right. It's the whole entire NBA. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. Any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off the order the next day, up to $10 off. Use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, the Brooklyn Nets falling to the Hornets on the road, losing now 7 in a row. And that needle thread and that bit of a tongue twist before the break about what they're doing versus what matters and high tanking odds, low winning percentages, and everything in between. The funny part is, so we talk about D'Angelo Russell only playing 29 minutes, but he's averaging under 24 since coming over in the trade with the Lakers this season. And he was averaging 26 to the Lakers. They have their own issues there. So it's not like this is anything different relative to what he's been doing with Brooklyn. I think in this game, as we talk about it, because he played 24 minutes against Golden State, 25 against San Antonio, he hasn't played over 30 minutes. There's not a game here. 29 actually ties his high, going back to playing against the Kings at the end of January. So like this is how much he plays. So you can make the case that, no, they're not doing anything funky here down the stretch of this game because that's what his minutes are. It's the fact that he's cooking in this game and he's putting up 28 points and Cam Thomas is struggling 1 of 8 from beyond the arc and you don't have Cam Johnson. If you're looking at this game and just saying like, hey, we want to go win it, then you probably just have D'Lo play 33 minutes and you probably win the game. That's the difference here, where it does feel a little bit like we're going to go ahead and manipulate just also a touch, just enough to maybe make it possible to have the Hornets come back in the fourth quarter of this one.
Look, they've signaled they don't want to do this thing that I mentioned before the break, which is this other thing that a lot of other teams doing, which is everyone sits and you basically just say, lose please. Which I was thinking about. I was walking the other day and I was like, I wonder how many teams were if you just gave them the forfeit option, if it was like, hey, like it's a forfeit. Well, which is why the NBA is so screwed, like with these rules, because I think some teams would actually consider it, right? It's like, maybe, right? Like, we get to just forfeit, lose automatically. Like the fact that you would even begin thinking that means the NBA is so some curse word that I don't want to say here. So anyway, but the Nets have clearly signaled they don't want to do that, right? Cam Johnson was a legitimate injury here. Like they're not just sitting him. It's not just a tank rest. And you said D'Lo increases the minutes this game. Like they had kind of been sort of bringing him back slowly because he had been hurt for a few games. Mm-hmm. Like he increases his minutes by 15%, 20%. So they're just not doing it. They're not interested in the signal toward whatever some of these other teams, like the team across the court in this game. Hornets were like, wins? No, thanks. And so it's so brazen, and I get why teams do it, and I don't even begrudge the teams for doing it. The NBA set up this screwed up system. But the Nets have just shown they don't want to do that. They were trying to win. This was not a tank. They were trying to win this game, for sure, 100%. They did not want to lose down to the last shot, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But overall, I know why it drives a certain segment of the fan base totally crazy when D'Lo plays all these minutes, because he's like, hey, he's like the one good guy. Like he's like the one ball facilitator. Yeah. Like, can he just sit like the other? Like they sat LaMelo. Why can't we sit our guy? And I don't know. The Nets just don't want to do that. And I guess on some level, I'm happy about it. And at the other level, I'm like, I totally get why it would drive people completely crazy when Cooper Flagg is sitting at the top of the draft.
Oh, of course. And by the way, I saw someone over on Twitter. Somebody said this, and it was probably at halftime of this game, right? When the Brooklyn Nets are up and it looks like they're going to win this one. And it was along the lines of D'Angelo Russell is ruining the tank for the Brooklyn Nets. Why are they playing him? All these problems. And I just so fervently wanted to point out that since he's returned, the team is still losing. Since he's been playing well, the team is still losing games. Like they're 0-7 now, and he hasn't been there for every one of them, but they're still losing. So that's the part where, and I get it, but this is if you're that segment of the fan base, the eye test, you're like, too good. This guy's too good. He understands basketball too much. He plays too well. And by the way, it's true. It's what makes it so fascinating about the fact that the Lakers were like, this guy, we just cannot have him as a part of our team as we try to figure out ways to get better and, make a push towards the playoffs. They end up getting Luka, blah, blah, blah. But yes, D'Angelo Russell is a very solid veteran basketball player. And the fact that he can play as well as he does in games and pretty consistently since he's become a Brooklyn Net again, and the Nets still lose a lot of those games, is an indication about where this roster is and where this team and organization are. But I just found it so fascinating that even while losing, fans are like, it's too risky. If this guy gets his hands on the ball, there's some chance if he plays 30 minutes, we might lose this one, which is pretty funny to talk about. I want to get to, as you mentioned.
Real quick. Hold on one second. Just D'Lo. I mean, there is a case to be made. Like over the last 15 games, and they are still losing the games. The Nets have 3 players. Well, 4, but this one's really pretty much neutral. You want to take a guess here? The Nets have 3 players who are positive in the plus minus over the last 15 games. So over this sort of extended streak, which was, I don't know what they are over the last 15. I know they're for the last 7, but you want to take a guess who those 3 players are? These are the 3 players that are positive for this stretch.
So D'Lo is
one you're going to know because okay. Yeah.
And then I'm still going to throw in Day'Ron Sharpe because he's been kind of that guy this season. Yes.
Yep. He's number 1.
And then that's a good question here. And then let's go with I'll go with a sneaky one with Trendon Watford maybe because he's played good.
Bam, buddy! I saw your eyes. I can tell by the reaction you weren't lying, but I saw those eyes going around a little bit. But I was like, "There's no way he looked this up this quickly."
But by the way, though, I was darting on the roster, being like, any name that jumps out that feels like this would be a good thing. Any name.
Yeah, who's looked good for. I mean, it is Watford. It's 2.8 for Sharpe plus minus, D'Lo at 1.8, and then Watford at 1.6, and Jay Wilson's 0.3. So I didn't count him. But those are the 3 positives. So the fans that are saying okay, well, these are the guys contributed to winning. I mean, technically on a possession by possession basis, that is these guys have played quote unquote winning basketball. If you're just looking at points for, points against, and so. If you're well, everyone else is just an overwhelming negative, can these guys just take a game or two off? Because that's the other thing too. It's I think what's driven fans a little bit nuts maybe rightfully so under the constraints of the current season, is that these other teams are like, they do, like, every once in a while you just get a little bit of a rest, right?
Mhm.
Like the Raptors are like, okay, well, RJ is going to sit, and now IQ is going to sit. It's back to back. Like the Nets just haven't even signaled that either. And look, when you're going for the difference between a 9% chance of Cooper Flag and a 14% chance of Cooper Flag, it's meaningful. Like it's meaningful. And again, people are like, oh, it's 5%. If you think, like, if Cooper Flag's $100 million player and you were given $100 million and you had a chance to go for 5% more at like a percentage of the $100 million, especially if it was all or nothing, dude, you'd do everything for it. Like you would do everything for it. If it was an all or nothing thing, because you don't get 5% less of Cooper Flag. you don't get to keep, like, you don't get to keep.
Oh, but do we get
an?
Is there an option for that? Like, can we get?
And
like,
I get, like, okay, well,
Ace Flag?
Yeah, like there's Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper and all these other guys. So like, to some degree there is, right? But like, it's one of these things, like, people completely underrate that, like, 5% when you're talking about possible generational talent is a meaningful deal, especially when it's 5%. Like, you don't get part of them. Like, this isn't your bank account interest rate where you just, it climbs up a little bit if you deposit more money. It's like, no, it's either you get it all or you don't. So I can understand the part where it's like, okay, well, D'Lo, he's the guy, he's +9 in this game. They could desperately use this loss, blah, 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 blah. And so I can see why it drives people crazy. Anyway, yeah, those are the, good job by you. I buried it a little bit. Good job by you knowing the 3 guys that were positive.
Come on now. And if you build out the rest of this roster, it's like, and that's why you think you build the rest of the roster. Well, there's only 3 guys that are positive. So, I mean, over the last 15 games, like, you think it'd be hard to win basketball games that way.
You want to guess who the worst is? By the way, real quick, you want to guess who the worst is in that stretch?
I'll just say Nick Claxton.
By a lot. It's by a lot. That's not Claxton.
Oh, who is it?
Cam Thomas, by a lot.
Yeah, that's going to be, hey, if one thing is consistent, it's going to be that the numbers tell you
only 4
that
games.
Cam Thomas should be as divisive a player as humanly possible for the
only
Brooklyn
4
Nets.
games. Everyone else has a lot in there, so we'll take that as small sample size. Okay,
so
sorry.
By the way, in this game too, so Cam Thomas, who struggles in this game, he goes 29 minutes, 7 to 18, but it's the 1 to 8 from beyond the arc that really hurts him here. And by the way, other things that happen after Doug and I talk about it is, hey, if Cam Thomas is going to give you 6 and 7 assists per game for the rest of the season, yeah, that's going to mean something. 3 assists didn't look so good. And also down the stretch here, before we get to the final shot, Cam Thomas tries to get, like, he has an opportunity and gets rejected in the lane by Bridges for the Hornets, who had a obviously monster performance for him. So it's like, that was a pretty culminating moment for, as we talk positively about D'Angelo Russell in this game. It was like, okay, that ties a little bow on Cam Thomas's night. And then you end up getting down to the final possession, which almost, after everything, almost got this thing to overtime on a finger flip from nearly half court.
All right. I got a couple thoughts on that Cam Thomas thing, because it does sort of like point out the thing that we've been talking about a little with him, not in an amazing way, but we'll talk about that here in just 1 second.
Ooh.
Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. 200 extra bucks to use on everything. Buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, it's all there. Even who's cutting down the nets. Look, you got to, every time we enter March Madness, everyone's got their eyes on the underdogs, right? FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, live in-game betting as well. And don't even worry about that bracket. The bracket resets every single day over on FanDuel. That's because it doesn't matter if your bracket's busted. That's right. You're right back in the action over on FanDuel with $200 in bonus bets. If that first $5 bet wins, visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel.com.
All right. As we tie a pretty little bow onto the Brooklyn Nets game and this episode, frankly, we're back all week long. They have 2 more back-to-back going on Monday and Tuesday night. And we want to get into the tankathon situation as well, because a lot happened over the weekend. But first, the final shot, the Cam Thomas of it all. I think it's Zaire Williams with the flip before the buzzer that doesn't go.
Yeah, well, it's funny about this Cam Thomas thing, because I don't want to drag him, really, and this isn't going to mean to drag him, but like this,
by the way,
final shot
says right before they drag somebody, guys. Just a heads up.
Yeah, I know. I feel bad about this, but it is funny because when we're talking about the assists, where early on too, he had like 2 assists pretty quick, and I did the math real quick on the previous 3 games, and I added like the part of the game that they had played already, which was like the 12-minute mark. He had like 2 assists at the 12-minute mark. I was like, this is more than 7 assists per 30 minutes over the last 3 games or something. Like, it was running down. It was like probably closer to 8. And I'm like, oh, this really happened. He had 1 assist from then on. He had 1 assist in the next 19 minutes based on that math. But if you get into this final possession, they have a chance. They have a chance to tie the game with him. And he drives into the lane, and Bridges is so sure that Cam's just going to shoot it and not pass, even though there was time on the clock, that he just completely leaves his man. And when Cam actually goes up for the shot, there's two guys just standing under the basket, like not wide open, but I'm pretty sure Zaire was was wide open.
By NBA standards,
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's like 2 seconds left on the clock, and I know he's got his eye on shooting it, and these are like bang bang kind of moments, and I get that part of it, right? And so, but it's one of these things like, oh, if we're thinking about the assists, and it's like, oh, you have a chance to just do kind of an obvious thing because the second, and Bridges kind of makes it defensive. I mean, I get why he does it because he's like, you can't even hedge your bets at this point. Like Cam Thomas is probably going to shoot, but he's so sure that he gets up in the air. Like he gets up in the air and then obviously blocks the shot. Like because he just gets his reach and just gets the block on the way up. But Cam, even just with an extra moment in the air, like could have passed it. So it's funny that's sort of like it's funny that ends up being the final moment. I'm not sure how many players do make the pass. Again, it's very very bang bang here, and it's drawn up for him to shoot. And right before that, he's got a completely clear lane. Right? Like he gets by his defender and he's just wide open in the lane. So I get why, but it's just funny. Like when you take a bird's eye view of that, when he gets blocked, there's at least one guy standing completely wide open on the block, and which would have probably been a dunk would that have tied it? Yeah. So anyway, just a funny kind of circumstance that plays out.
Yeah, it's fun. And actually, no, this would have put them.
Sorry,
watching in the background, right? So they get
it's 32. 32 seconds. I got this timing wrong in this. It was 32 seconds left, and he gets blocked. Right? Is that when the timing?
No.
This
is 7. This is. Let's just we can reset just a little bit because
4 seconds.
One thing because I'm watching it like in the background right now while we're talking about it. So it's 7.9 on the inbounds possession, right? And the Nets are down 1. It's 103-102.
Yep.
To your point. The Cam loses his defender coming from the right baseline, running out to the top of the key. He gets the inbound pass. He's already lost his defender. Now, when you freeze frame this, I'll put this up over on Twitter because
there's no one real quick. There's no one even in the shot, right? Like by him, like he's so wide.
This open. Is a foot behind the foul line. He's going up into his shot. So there's a couple things that I think play against him here. One, as you mentioned, like he's wide open, but his momentum takes him. By the time he releases this shot, he's on the interior arc of the paint. So like he probably ends up leaning forward another 2-3 feet. And Bridges it's a great play. He makes an incredible play to close out that space there, and it ends up being on the baseline. I actually think it's Russell that's on the baseline under the basket, as the wide open guy that he could have dumped it off to. So I will say, but because I still agree with you. He ends up jumping in. He hops into the lane before he actually releases that shot. Bridges makes a great play. And as you mentioned, like most guys that are great shooters, they're going to make that the play's drawn up for you. That's what the goal is here.
Sure.
And it's this like little moment where if you want to focus in on him, and I think we should, because that's what we're asking ourselves down the stretch of the season is this guy capable of expanding his game? This is the play that Steph Curry, he dumps that ball off. 1,000 times out of 1,000, probably. Like if you put it up there and everything is laid out that way, he probably dumps it off to his teammate that's wide open. And I use Steph Curry's example because he's smaller and he's great and he can shoot and also does an excellent job of setting up his teammates. He's one of the best. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at that one moment there and go, yeah, how great would it have been if you just dropped it off, they dunk it, you're up 1 with probably 2.5 seconds left on the clock, and you're going to get. I wonder this. Do you think that Cam Thomas hesitates to like make that basketball play just because instinctually he's an elite scorer and that's what your mentality is and that's the play that's drawn up? And also because like you get celebrated for game-winning shots. I'm not saying this is like him and the ego, but it's like you don't get celebrated for game-winning drop-off passes, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think there is something to that of like the biggest moment, you want to be that guy. And I'm not saying he has that active thought before he, chooses to pull it up there. But it is a part of it, right? Big games, big shots, bright lights, blah, blah, blah. And he wants to make that shot because that's what he's done his whole career. When the easier play probably gets you more of the accolades at a high level.
Yeah. So, okay. Cam Thomas defense here, I would say, like, it's very obvious why he shot the ball. He gets like the way you described it is exactly how it happens. He gets everything is the landing, the runway is clear for him when he gets the ball. I think there's I don't actually think he even made a mistake here. I think he should have shot the shot. I think when they draw it up and he's that wide open, I think you'd be insane to not think you're just taking the shot. It's like no one is even in front of you. His momentum carries a little
drop
further.
It off, ball bounces out of bounds. They go, what the heck is Cam thinking there? You got to shoot that.
And Bridges does something that actually a lot of guys don't do at that point, which is completely overcommit and to leave your defender. And I think so. I think that in Cam's defense here, it makes total sense why he did it. I think most players do take the shot. Like in this, like when you get the ball coming around that curl action and you're that wide open, it's like the play has worked out better than you could have ever dreamed at that point. Like the ATO is like so great at that point. You're like, oh my God. To the point where I actually wonder if he was like a little surprised how wide open he was because he continues to go into the lane.
I was going to end up deeper in the paint than he needs to, right? Like
exactly with no resistance. I just don't even think they ever thought that like that was going to be this wide open. So and then so you combine that with Bridges doing something that most guys don't do, which is completely leave your guy and go pot committed on getting the block, which he does. It was an unbelievable play by Bridges. To get a clean block on that shot is like a really very, very difficult thing. So I'm actually not even blaming Cam. I'm more saying that it's funny about how we talk about this one thing.
Yeah.
And it ends up sort of like playing out like this. And it sounds like it's like a negative on him. And I don't know. I don't necessarily feel bad about it, but like it's really not. It's just highlights this thing that we've talked about. And he has all the excuses in the world. Like I get it. I think most players, their eyes probably become as big as saucers at that point, and it just kind of doesn't work out. But it's just interesting sort of how it plays out because it's him and like the actual technical aspects of what ended up happening when you see who's like sort of standing under the basket. That's really all. And I know people are like, oh, you hate Cam. It's really not that. It's just like sort of interesting that it ends up playing out like that.
No, and guess what? Like this is the way it is for all. Like when you have your best player on the team, whoever it may be, or the guy you think can be that player can elevate to be a star. You say you go through the same things when it comes to, which I always think is the worst. Kevin Durant's one of the greatest players of all time, but let's go look at his clutch percentages. And, when it matters most is he knock down the bucket. Like, oh, well, that's a problem for him or problem for LeBron, whatever it is. You go, well, there's still a great, whatever. You can micro analyze something down to the nth degree and take it whichever way you want, by the way. In this case, an off game for Cam Thomas overall. Not a great shooting night, obviously, from beyond the arc. The Nets lose. The last thing here, though, is while the Nets were losing this game, this was the tank off because you had Washington playing against Toronto. You had Brooklyn playing against Charlotte. So the Nets get the loss here. They're 21-42. Toronto tried. They were doing it. They had it, but by fingertips end up losing a basketball game instead of winning it. So the Nets don't maybe climb into the 5th position here. And then oddly enough, dude, we'll talk about this over the week. Remember how we said like no one's ever going to touch Washington? Well, don't look now, but they've won 2 games and Utah has lost 4. It's only one game back in the loss column, 2 in the win column right now. Like Charlotte winning this game actually against the Brooklyn Nets plays a big factor in the tank odds there and where it all stands. So it was a funny little weekend here where the Nets do lose. The streak extends to 7 and Toronto doesn't play his part to get the Nets there into that 5th position, which as we all have been talking about is probably the highest they can achieve. Almost there. I still feel like they're destined to get there in the end.
It would have been nice. Jamal Sheed was the guy who had the tip, for the Raptors, and it would have been nice for the Raptors to win that one with the Nets just pulling defeat from the jaws of victory. Like it would have been, they just can't. It's funny they just can't get over this Toronto hurdle. Like the Nets have gone 0-7 and barely have made any. I think they got in 1 game or something like that on the Raptors during the stretch. So, I don't know. Like I think it's going to end up
arms. You wouldn't think you would get caught up by them, but
they have this. They have a run now where if they start with the Lakers, who do they have? Real quick, we'll just go through. This
like
2 seconds. They have Lakers on Monday, but then after that, then Lakers, Cleveland, Chicago's been looking a little bit better lately, and then Boston, and then Atlanta, then Boston again, and then twice to Indiana, and then Dallas.
When we had talked about the 15 games and then the wins and losses, I looked at the back end of that stretch, which is this right now, the next 7 or so games, and said, oh, they could be rough there if they don't win some. Well, they've done all the losing up front. They've lost all 7 of the games leading into the really hard stretch where these are like wins that teams need. Yeah. So it's not, the Nets are going to make a hard push to get over top of that Toronto Raptors hurdle in the 5th spot there.
I said 3-12 at the beginning, and I'm not sure they get to 3.
Oh, it's for me. Yeah. Yours truly was like, hey man, like let's just tease a little bit with 5 potentially. What an embarrassment.
5. Now they're going to reel off 5 straight wins because that's how the season goes. Okay,
That's how
we are going to get out of here. We'll be back after the Lakers game. No LeBron in that one. And I know fans are going to be like, oh, of course, like now the Lakers aren't going to have LeBron because LeBron looks like he's going to be out for multiple weeks with a groin injury. That's all right.
Still have Luka. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no problem. That's why I can't even look at Dallas. I feel so bad for Dallas fans. What am I saying? Okay, yeah, make sure you subscribe over on YouTube. That's totally free. Leave a comment. We're doing Fan Take Fridays every Friday. Leave comments. We get them in there. Subscribe over on YouTube and leave a comment as well.
You better believe it. Hey, guys, I attribute my success to this. I never gave or took any excuse. And that's Florence Nightingale. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. R.I.P. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.